But yeah, good stuff. Okay. Let's talk about college football, Bryan.
Yes.
Because this week, it's amazing to me how usually you get like one weekend with like some upsets and some kind of, some craziness or whatever. But we've had multiple weekends already.
So, Vince, you and I said before the season that we thought this was going to be a weird year of college football. It's been way more than I thought. I mean, just like Fresno State goes on the road and beats UCLA and then has to play UNLV down to the wire. UNLV is awful. I mean, awful. Just a wild week of college football. And another, I mean, it's like every week, even when they're, and the thing is, this wasn't supposed to be a great weekend because there weren't a ton of marquee games. And
well, you had Alabama, Southern Miss, Georgia, Vanderbilt, Oregon, Arizona.
Clark Lee's at all thinking like, man, what was I thinking?
Maybe I made the wrong.
They hung 35 up on Clark Lee's team in the first quarter. They scored 62, they called the dogs off after the first quarter.
That's bad.
They could have scored 100 on Vanderbilt if they wanted to. I'm not joking.
Easily. I mean, if you're getting 35 a quarter,
it was bad.
Yeah,
it was bad. So yeah, Vince, let's talk about some games, man. Let's roll. You want to?
Well, what we did last time is I just kind of started at the top of the AP poll and we started working our way down. I don't know if that's the way you want to go or not.
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, obviously, I could care
first
less
three.
Not care less to talk about, Alabama, Southern Miss,
of course,
Georgia, Oregon, Arizona, or Georgia, Vanderbilt. But yeah, let's do it, man.
Well, let's start with Oklahoma, West Virginia.
Saturday night and Sunday. I've watched a lot of college football. So,
yep, Oklahoma, West Virginia would be the next on the list. And it's interesting to me. Oklahoma's 4-0. They're ranked number 4 in the country, and people are calling for the starting quarterback's job. Sound familiar?
Preseason Heisman candidate. People might be in a first-round pick.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I love it.
I mean, look, is he lighting the world on fire?
The fans started calling for the backup quarterback during the game like that.
They were chanting his name.
Yeah. Caleb Williams is the backup quarterback.
Williams.
That's not a good look, Oklahoma fans.
Yeah, the dude went 26 of 36. He only missed 10 passes.
Right.
Okay. I mean, I don't know.
But there's something I'm trying to think. There's something amiss, right? What's the play? There's something amiss with the Oklahoma offense. They're just they're not clicking, and they really haven't. I mean,
I agree with that.
They clicked a little bit against Tulane. Tulane doesn't have a very good defense. They obviously clicked against that garbage FCS team they hung 76 on.
I mean,
the last 2 weeks though, their offense has not looked right. They didn't look right against Nebraska. They didn't look right against West Virginia. Although West Virginia has a salty defense. They had a good defense last year too. But they they're not running the ball. I mean, they're not running the ball well for them. They're still running the ball. I mean, if Notre Dame was running the ball like Oklahoma's struggling with their run game on, Notre Dame would be 4-0 and they'd be scoring over 50 points a game.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like struggling for them like a normal team that doesn't have just an abysmal offensive line. I mean, They've run for 116, 277, 194, and they ran for 57 yards against West Virginia.
57 yards.
If Notre Dame would have ran for 57 yards against Wisconsin, they'd have scored 51 points on offense. But there's just something like you'd mentioned Caleb Williams. I mean, you mentioned Spencer. Look at me. I'm even falling victim to it. He went 26 of 36, but he only could do for 256 yards. 7.1 yards per attempt. He was 24 of 34 last week against Nebraska, which again, I mean, he's completed over 70% of his passes every week, but he's 6.3 yards per attempt last week against Nebraska. So there's clearly something going on there. I mean, put it to you like this, Vince. Last year, Spencer Rattler was below 8 yards per attempt twice all year.
Okay.
He's been below that in 3 of the 4 games this year so far.
So, I mean, he's not playing great.
I don't think it's him, though.
But you're still 4-0.
Receivers aren't getting separation. Yeah. Their running back depth chart is a hot mess.
Well, they're clearly not running the ball very well. 57 yards against West Virginia.
Yeah. I mean, and Spencer's just got to be more able to attack down the field, and he's not willing to do that right now. So that was it's a mess. But kudos to West Virginia, because I like when teams like that go on the road and they don't back down, they don't play scared.
Sure.
They had some opportunities to win that game. I mean,
No doubt.
Oklahoma won it because they had a bad snap that lost them like 30 yards, which set Oklahoma up. So, to me, they don't look right, but to your point, Vince, they keep winning. They are 4-0.
They keep winning.
But they're like Notre Dame though. They're gonna have to step up because their schedule gets kind of real. They play at Kansas State this week, right? Then they play Texas on a neutral field, then home against TCU, then at Kansas, and then they got to play at Baylor and at Oklahoma State still. So they better step up. But sometimes we an issue I have, Vince. Sometimes we don't give the opponents enough credit.
Fair enough.
And I think West Virginia deserves a little bit of credit for that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So did you get a chance to watch much of that game?
I watched. It was on while we were doing our podcast, so I kind of had it on like off to the side. So I was kind of keeping an eye on it. Just a lot of bad offense on both sides, to be honest with you. From what I remember watching it, I just wasn't all that impressed with any of the offense that I was seeing in that game. So but again. Give credit to West Virginia. I have no problem with that. I mean,
West Virginia doesn't have much of an offense anyway. I mean, their offense is just kind of okay.
My takeaway from the whole thing is that Oklahoma is still a flawed football team, and it kind of goes to the narrative of the quote unquote top teams right now. They have flaws, right? I mean, look, Alabama would be the least flawed so far of all the teams, but there's flaws on these top teams, and Oklahoma definitely exemplifies that point to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Georgia and Alabama are the two least flawed teams right now.
Sure.
I'd say Oregon's next, but even Oregon needed a strong fourth quarter to pull away from an Arizona team that's just has the longest winning streak in the FBS Power 5 right now. I mean, it's almost 2 full seasons at this point in time.
Right.
So,
they had to put 17 on the board in the fourth quarter.
That's going to happen. I mean, they're not flawed. I just don't think they played well. I think they had kind of had some high leverage game. Fresno battled them. Ohio State was an emotional game. Sometimes you're just going to have that kind of deal. You're just going to have that day.
Speaking of that kind of deal, are we going to give credit to Colorado State going into Iowa?
Iowa's offense has stunk all year. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. Like, they won a game and scored like 30 points, and they had like less than 200 yards of offense. That is one of the most overrated teams in the country, in my opinion. I know there's some people who are going to get real salty about that.
They're the 5th ranked team in the country.
They're an ugly team. And you know what the problem is we're still like, I'm going to actually release an Irish Breakdown top 25 today. And it's really hard to do because it's almost impossible to remove your preseason bias from things.
Sure.
Like, I'm going to have Oklahoma higher. Well, does Oklahoma really deserve to be based on how they've done this year? No, but I still have some preseason bias. And that's all I think what's happening with Iowa is they're looking at that Iowa State game as some big win.
Right.
And clearly it wasn't now. I mean, they barely beat Northern Illinois. They got smacked by Iowa. They lost by double digits to Iowa, and Iowa don't even think got the 200 yards of total offense.
Right.
They just got smacked. They just got beat by Baylor, who's okay. Dave Aranda's doing a real nice job turning that program around, but this is not a Baylor Art Briles team, right? It's an okay team that's going to still lose several games in that league. And Iowa, struggled. I mean, they struggled. 10-point win at the end, but they struggled with Colorado State, who stinks, by the way.
Right.
Who blew a 2-touchdown lead to Vanderbilt.
They're 1-3.
Yeah.
Okay. They're 1-3. Yeah.
They're terrible. Iowa's offense, and somebody said it in our chat on Saturday or Friday, but Iowa's going to get there soon because they're going to start playing some teams that aren't awful here real soon, and unless their offense can figure, because Iowa's not running the ball right now.
They play Penn State, they play Wisconsin, they play Purdue. All of those could be potential.
Iowa has
losses,
one of the
all
best
of those
running backs in the country. So, supposedly, and I think he is. I shouldn't say supposedly because I think Tyler Goodson's a really good player. They got one of the best supposedly offensive lines in the country, and they ran for 158 yards against Indiana, 4.4 yards per carry. They ran for 67 yards against Iowa State, 1.7 yards per carry, 206 against Kent State. Come on. And then they ran for 54 at 1.7 yards per carry against Colorado State.
Right.
Colorado State.
Yes.
So, and I get that Notre Dame is a team that just rushed for 3 yards. But
fair enough.
We're banging Notre Dame. We're saying Notre Dame is a flawed team because of that. But, at least Notre Dame can do some other things well. I don't even think that their pass game doesn't do a whole lot for me. I'm not a big Iowa fan. This team doesn't do it for me. But yes, kudos to Colorado State for exposing Iowa as an overrated team.
Well, sure. And I mean, look, they're going to Maryland next week. They probably win that game. I'm not overly enthusiastic about Maryland, but then the rubber meets the road with
I'm going to
Penn State.
disagree with you on that one.
Really?
Yes. Maryland's 4-0.
Okay.
They beat West Virginia, which now looks like a much better win now, in my opinion.
Okay.
Because again, look at what West Virginia's done so far, right? West Virginia lost on the road by 6 points to Maryland, and then they lost a tough road game against Oklahoma, but then they beat Virginia Tech, who was ranked, and then they destroyed, was it Long Island U? They didn't look great against Illinois, but they got the W.
Yeah,
right?
They won by 3,
and they smacked Kent State pretty good. And they've got some athletes. The thing that about Maryland that we're going to find out this weekend is we've seen Maryland kind of have starts like this before, and then just completely collapse.
Right.
Like I remember, was it 19? They beat Howard 79-0. Then they played a Syracuse team that I think was ranked going into the season. Because remember, Syracuse was coming off that 10-win season, and they beat them like 63-20. Maryland did. And you're like,
right.
Wow. And I think they jumped into the top 25. And then they go play Temple the next week and lose to Temple. And then just like won one game the rest of the year. And they start off in 2018, they beat Texas, right? Remember, Texas was a preseason top 10 team, beat Bowling Green, then they lost to Temple, and then bounced back with a win over Minnesota. They're 3-1, looks like a great start, and then they won 2 of their next 8 games. They're a weird team, but they're also a talented team, and on offense. Tua's little brother is playing really well. They got a couple receivers that are really good. Dante Demas is a really good player. Raheem Jarrett was a 5-star recruit that went from he was from DC, but he was committed to LSU, flipped to Maryland. So they've got some athletes. We're going to find out if Mike Locksley knows how to get these guys ready to play this weekend, Vince, because they have I think they've looked good so far. But this weekend is going to be so I guess I don't necessarily say I disagree with you on how they looked so far. I'm not necessarily saying I expect them to win this weekend.
I was going to say, are they on upset alert? Is Iowa on upset alert here?
If Maryland plays like they have so far this season, because you don't got to score a ton to beat Iowa. I mean, that's the thing,
True.
And the thing I liked about Maryland too that is different is West Virginia was kind of doing some things that you say in the past. You say, oh, this is where Maryland folds. They didn't fold. Same thing with Illinois. They're playing like crap, but they did what they needed to do to win at the end. Those are games that they would lose in the past.
Right.
And so I'm going to give them credit for that. But, we're really going to find out this weekend if they're for real. But my disagreement is not so much that they're going to beat Iowa. It's more so that I actually have liked what I've seen from them so far this year.
See, I feel like if Iowa loses to Maryland, it's because they're looking forward to the following week against Penn State.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like this is your typical trap game for Iowa, Yeah. So,
because I wonder how many of the players feel the same way about Maryland that you do.
Right, exactly.
Right? I mean, that's a very good point, Vince.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's get to some more games. Let's talk about some more games.
Do you want to talk Penn State Villanova, because that wasn't much of a contest? But I mean, if you want to give your thoughts on Penn State,
any FBS games. I want to see Penn. I still don't know what to make of Penn State.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought that their win over Maryland or Wisconsin was more about Wisconsin pissing that game away than it was about them beating them. I don't think much of Auburn right now, but they're doing what they need to do. Right, that's the big thing is they played an FBS team this weekend. It's a good FBS team. Villanova is usually a pretty good FBS team, but they did what they needed to do. I'm not sold on them so much right now, but I feel that way. I mean, Vince, you could just kind of insert that on everybody. I'm not sold on that team yet. If your name's not Georgia, Alabama, or Oregon, I'm not sold on you yet. I mean, that's where I'm at right now.
Right.
That
only leaves one spot open in the college football playoff. So I mean,
there's going to be a lot of games coming up here soon where the contenders and pretenders are going to
kind of thin the herd out a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. So the next one on the list is the one that you called would be Arkansas, Texas A&M. with Arkansas pretty much putting a whooping on Texas A&M. I don't know. I mean, they didn't have a lead at any point in the game.
No, I mean, it was 17-0 early,
yeah.
and it's 20-10 was the final. I mean,
Texas A&M, they scratched back, but they didn't.
That Arkansas was playing without their starting quarterback. He got hurt in the third quarter, and they kind of just went like, let's run the clock out kind of thing, because their backup quarterback's a runner. He's not really a thrower. And the whole reason why I predicted them to lose, Vince, was number one, Arkansas has two things to beat Texas A&M. They have really good skill. Right, Traylon Burks is a really good receiver. He had a huge play in the game. They have really good skill and a quarterback that's athletic and willing to take some shots, KJ Jefferson. If you remember correctly, I loved KJ coming out of high school.
Yeah.
But the other thing, too, is Texas A&M, they have a salty defense. They're not a great defense, but they have a salty defense, and Texas A&M's offense is garbage. This is a team that scored 10 points against Colorado, okay? Their offense is garbage. And I didn't think you needed to score much to beat them. And that's exactly what happened. You don't have to score much to beat them. But Arkansas it is amazing. This is a team that used to just self-destruct every single week. Whenever adversity happened, that team would just fold. And Sam Pittman has them playing hard.
Yeah, I'm impressed because where they came from when you and I did the pregame show, or not pregame, but preseason show on Arkansas to where they are now, I mean, light years different. I was pretty shocked because, look, I'll be the first one to admit I'm not following Arkansas and what they're doing between last year and up to this point. I looked at Arkansas going into last year and looked at it being a rout from Notre Dame, and then I stopped paying attention. So,
and it would have been last year.
I'm impressed.
It would have been a rout last year.
Yeah,
this year,
absolutely,
not so much.
Agreed. Okay, so next game is the big one.
Can we just say this real quick?
Please.
This is why we said before the season, Texas A&M is overrated. They were getting way too much hype.
They got no offense.
Care how good your defense is. When your offense is that bad, it doesn't matter how good your defense is.
Right. Yep. And we talked about that formula a long time ago. Defense doesn't win championships anymore. I mean, you defense will get you to a good spot, but offense needs to carry you the rest of the way. And they clearly don't have an offense that's going to do that. So it's going to be a long season for A&M. They just, they got a piece of it today, on Saturday, but
on a neutral field.
More will be coming. I have a feeling.
Yeah. Well, they got Mississippi State at home this weekend, and then October 9th, that team from Tuscaloosa comes to town. So
that's going to be an epic beatdown. Okay. The big one, the big upset of the weekend was NC State double overtime victory over Clemson, 27-21. Clemson's offense just continues to struggle. And I mean, look, we knew that we knew the Clemson defense was going to be good, okay? And they are good, okay?
Saturday was the first time they've given up an offensive touchdown.
Right. They're good. But the offense is, former 5-star quarterback DJ Uiagalelei only puts up 111 yards on 12 of 26. 12 of 26, a 4.3 yard average. Okay. I just, that's not going to get it done at any level of football, let alone as a top 5, top 10 team.
Vince, he has yet to get to 200 yards passing in a game.
That's based on what we saw against Notre Dame last year. Okay. Just that little piece. I'm shocked. Look, I never thought that he was going to be Trevor Lawrence. I never thought that he was going to be a mobile quarterback and be able to do things. But I thought he could stand in the pocket and sling the rock.
Yeah.
And he can't even do that right now.
This is what we always say. Don't assume because the guy did A as a backup quarterback off the bench that he's going to do A when he becomes a starter.
Well played, sir.
I've been saying this for a million times. And this isn't about DJ, though. This is a couple things. Number one is there's way too much hype on him. Number one, he's a redshirt. He's basically a sophomore, right? Who had 2 starts, and that's really all he did last year. Offensive line is terrible. And if Jack Cohn as a 5th-year senior is struggling to play behind a porous offensive line, imagine being a sophomore.
Sure.
Who played at one of the 5 best high school teams in the country. He was never rattled like this. He didn't play at Sayville High School in New York, right? Where he was, Jack Cohn was playing against a bunch of guys who are never going to play college football at any level, right? This kid played at St. John Bosco, where every time they took the field, they were significantly more talented than anybody they played except maybe once or twice. And he's got a terrible offensive line, and they're having the same problem that is my fear about Notre Dame in the future, which is they have a bunch of receivers that do the exact same thing. And when your offensive line isn't good and you don't have guys like Amari Rodgers or Ray McLeod or Hunter Renfrow, and your offense is just built around vertical guys, well, guess what? You don't have time to get the ball out to them.
Yeah.
And then you're asking those guys to do things like bubbles and quick stuffs, and that's just not – Joseph Ngata is not that kind of guy. You're trying to make him be that guy. And he's not that guy. Their running back depth chart is a mess because of injuries and guys transferring out. They got one-dimensional receivers. It's like they started recruiting big names and went away from building their depth chart with what got them there, which was speed and playmaking ability. They got a bunch of big guys. And it's just everything that could go. And I'm going to say something else.
Okay.
With all due respect, it's like, so sometimes – like, okay, I'll say this. I'll use our show for an example. I did my own show for a while, and it was fine. It was whatever, but I didn't like doing it because it was just me. You could go do your own show, and maybe it'll be great, but maybe it's not. But I think sometimes people work better together, right?
Yeah.
I feel Tony Elliott and Jeff Scott are two guys that separate are not necessarily great coaches. But when they were together, they just had that connection, and they were a great combination. The Clemson offense has not been the same since Jeff Scott left for South Florida. Jeff Scott's not doing anything at South Florida either.
Right.
And it's not so much that, it was always Jeff Scott all along. No, I think Tony Elliott's a really smart guy. But when you've got that guy that you kind of came up with, they were young assistants together under the Chad Morris, and then they took over as co-coordinators, and they worked great together. And sometimes you lose that second voice, you know what I mean? And that guy that you counseled or you counted on and you
sure.
run ideas by, and they don't have that now.
Yeah, there's something.
And
to be
their
said
offense has not been the same. And what we said this summer was Trevor Lawrence and to a degree Travis Etienne hit a lot of warts that were there. And this is what we talked about. Did I think they were going to be this bad on offense, Vince? No. Did you and I say they weren't going to be as good this year as people think they were? They're going to take a step back? Yes. I didn't think it was going to be this big of a step back.
Right, exactly.
That's been the surprise for me. Like, yeah, they're not throwing it, but they're also not running it. I mean, they're not doing anything. It's like, whew. And this is why I said a couple weeks ago, I'd much rather be Notre Dame right now than Clemson. And some people laughed and so you're crazy. And I'm like, okay, how you feel about that now? Because they just lost to NC State, who got smacked by Mississippi State 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to say this is the beginning of the end for Clemson and their run, but they're going to have a tough time, I think, getting back to the elite status. They're still going to be in contention and they're still going to be hanging around for a while. But I think the elite part of things might be over for a little bit.
I think he needs to – it depends on how he handles this offseason.
Okay.
I think if he's unwilling to make some changes, like there was a time – it was around like 13 and 14. Like Alabama went 2 years without winning a title and people were losing their minds.
Yeah, right.
And Saban made some changes to the program that kind of got them going again. Dabo's going to have to do that. I think it's gotten a little stale. Their recruiting hasn't been quite as good on offense the last couple of years. They're getting big names, but not necessarily. Like one thing that Clemson did so well early in the 2010s and to the middle, like up to the point of their run starting, is they would get the big names, but they also mix those guys in with some really good, role players. They would go out and find the Isaiah Simmonses, the 3-star kids that had great athleticism that they developed. Now they're just going after the big name recruits. It seems like more often than not, and it's like. It's kind of puzzling what they're doing right now, recruiting wise.
Right.
And I mean, it
just feels like they're losing their way a little bit to me.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's
like it's stale.
Yes. Exactly correct. Yep.
I'll say something. I think part of the problem is I think playing in the ACC has masked some problems too.
Right. And because there's such a disparity between Clemson and everybody else. I mean, at least for the last
you're still blowing people
10
out,
years.
but The Ohio State game last year should have been the wake-up call for them, in my opinion, because they were embarrassed. Like LSU the year before, LSU was just a better team. I mean, Clemson battled and had a lead early. I mean, for a decent amount of the first half, Clemson was pinning LSU back and playing good D. I think they had like a 17.7 lead at one point in time. It just LSU is the better team.
Yeah.
They were embarrassed by Ohio State last year, and I don't think Ohio State was necessarily that good of a team, as we found out against Alabama. They made Clemson look bad. That should have been his wake-up call. That, hey, we got to do something different. There's something stale here that we got to fix, and if it's definitely going to happen now. Yeah.
Well, as I peruse down the list here, I think Ohio State Akron, probably not going to talk about that one.
Other than Kevon Pope losing his freaking mind, they kicked him off the team today. Big shocker.
Oh, really? What happened there? Help me out.
Apparently, he was supposed to go on the field, and a player waved him off, and he went and just like lost his mind on the sideline. Took his jersey off, threw it in the sideline. Went up and got Ryan's Day's face, and he's like, "Get out of here!"
Are you
threw his
kidding
gloves
me?
off. Went into the locker room, and tweeted "FUCC Ohio State" from his Twitter account. Like they had to escort him off the field. And he eventually went back and said, "I'm sorry, I lost my cool." It's like, yeah, you can apologize, but
it ain't happening.
Sometimes there's no coming back from that.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow.
And he not only burnt that bridge, he dropped an atomic bomb on it.
No kidding.
And then launched 3 tomahawks afterwards just in case there was something left over.
Just to make sure.
It was bad. It was bad.
I got a lot to say about that, but
yeah.
I don't know. It enhances my thoughts of Ohio State.
Yes.
It just does.
Yes.
Anyway, Florida took care of business against Tennessee in the Swamp. That one was never really close. Tennessee had a lead briefly in the second quarter, but Tennessee's still a ways away yet.
Yep.
I think from any kind of relevance.
Yep. I'm gonna give 2 thoughts to skip ahead because I want to get your thoughts because I know you got to leave here soon.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Michigan, Rutgers. I'm not going to overreact too much. Is Rutgers just better than we think? Is Michigan do they have an off game? We're going to find out this weekend. Nebraska completely dominated Michigan State in the second half and pissed away an opportunity to get an upset win. Just pissed it away. The game I want to talk about.
Okay.
Georgia Tech curb stomping North Carolina. Did you watch any of that game? It was not competitive.
I did not see that game, but it's one that I had planned on going back and watching some of because of the outcome.
45-22.
Where did the Yellow Jackets come from? I mean, I realize they're 2-2.
How do you lose to Northern Illinois and then almost beat Clemson at Clemson and then curb stomp North Carolina? But
That's
bad is North Carolina's defense? Can we finally dispense with the Jay Bateman's a great defensive coordinator conversation? Like there were people advocating for that guy to be hired. And I know this is a personal bias. I don't dislike Jay Bateman personally, but I coached against Jay Bateman and we put 600 plus yards on Jay Bateman's defense. Okay. And I know it was 1AA, whatever, but I've never seen anything different. He was an Army and I'm like, people are talking about him being a Notre Dame guy. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. Their defense was and they do not play inspired football. When they get hit in the mouth, I've noticed this year, when they start fast, like they did against Virginia last week, they're good. But if you punch them in the mouth early, they fold.
Yeah.
And that surprises me a little bit.
Well, they gave up just shy of 400 yards to Georgia stinking Tech.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Now, here are my overall thoughts about this game. I am no longer worried about the North Carolina game. I'm really not. Mm-hmm. But I'm more worried about the Georgia Tech game than I was at the beginning of the season.
I'm not.
That's where I'm at.
That's just how bad. When you watch I want you to watch the game,
okay,
and come back and talk to me about that.
Okay,
I know you. I know you know football. I know how you think.
Yeah,
you're gonna watch. I'd be like, no, North Carolina just sucked.
Okay,
because you're gonna be like, yeah, of course, we know that they got weapons. You know, Jeff Sims is a really athletic quarterback, but this was not. I mean, Georgia Tech played hard and all that, but you're not gonna be worried about Georgia Tech. You're just gonna be like, wow, North Carolina sucks.
Okay.
They're bad. And their offensive line is not physical at all. And it's like, hey, look, Javonte Williams and Michael Carter aren't walking through that door. You know what I mean? Like, Julius Peppers and Dre Bly aren't working through that. Well, Dre is, but he's an assistant coach now.
He doesn't have the pads on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it was embarrassing. Like,
I mean, they only had
embarrassing.
63 yards rushing.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
that is embarrassing considering you just graduated 2,000-yard rushers.
Yes.
I mean, and it was look, those running backs were good, but it was scheme based too.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest, it was scheme
Javonte
based.
Williams is especially really good.
Yeah,
These next couple games, they're going to be able to get healthy. They play Duke at home, Florida State at home, and then Miami at home before they play Notre Dame. You know, and then a vaunted bye week. So I'm curious to see how they mentally bounce back this week.
Okay.
And I know you got to go, but I'm going to tell you what, Vince, another game I want you to watch. I want you to watch Wake Forest. They are legit.
Really?
They are legit. They are for an ACC. I mean, they're not going to go make the college football playoff and win a title. I'm just in the ACC for the ACC title. They're legit. The ACC to me is done. I don't see Wake Forest going. I mean, if Wake Forest and BC go undefeated, yeah, they'll be in the playoff, but they're not going undefeated. The ACC's done, which is good for Notre Dame. But I want you to watch Wake Forest just from an ACC context. They're legit within the ACC. I want you to watch them, and they have fewer career returning starts than Notre Dame. They're consistently less experienced than Notre Dame across the board, and yet they're scoring and running and doing all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I want you to check them out.
Okay, I can do that. Yeah. I can definitely do that. So,
yeah, because that was definitely a game this weekend that I thought was interesting.
Okay, fair enough. I'm writing it down.
Yes,
Wake.
Yes.
And UNC.
Texas hung 70 on Texas Tech. That was another interesting takeaway from the weekend.
Texas, good Lord.
Yeah, and then and that loss to Arkansas looks a lot better right now. Oklahoma continues to win ugly, upset Kansas State, and UCLA, our sleeper team for the season, is now 3-0 with an 11-point win at Stanford. Stanford falls to 2-2, so that was another one. And how about Georgia State almost beating Auburn?
Oh, yeah.
They had to get some home cooking to win that game.
Yes, they did. They had to score 15 in the fourth quarter just to win that game.
The coach for Georgia State calling that out, too. Like, well, they got some SEC home cooking. He said that after the game. It was beautiful. So
go ahead and find him.
I know you got to roll. This was a fun show. We need to not talk as much about Brian Kelly next time and talk more about the weekend's games.
I know.
Because this is a lot of fun. There were still so many other games I wanted to talk about from this weekend. SMU beat TCU on the road. I mean, just some Toledo got a W, and Florida State is 0-4. They lost at home to Louisville.
They're so bad.
They are.
I mean, can you imagine if Notre Dame would have blown that one? I mean, we'd be having a way different conversation right now.
We're going to end it with this, Vince. How about those Beavers, baby?
Putting a hurting on the Trojans, man.
Oh, my gosh. I so thoroughly enjoyed it. And it wasn't even really close. I mean, like, Oregon State was the better team.
Oregon State.
They were the better team. I mean, they came out in the second half, and USC made no adjustments. And Jonathan Smith coached circles around Todd Orlando in the second half of that game.
Yeah, whatever was left.
Keaton Slovis is so overrated. So is Graham Harrell. That was embarrassing. And I'm curious, Vince. I have a feeling USC is just going to implode.
Love it.
My fear was that you get the new coach and like they just I've got nothing to lose and they just play loose and all that. Nope, they're going to implode because they got to play at Colorado this week and then home against Utah before they get a bye and they got to come to Notre Dame. So anyway, we had to end that.
Massacre.
We had to end it with USC getting curb stomped by Oregon freaking State.
Fantastic.
Who lost to Purdue. I'm just saying.
Fantastic.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, and it wasn't all that close against Purdue either.
Yes, yes. Oregon, that's right. Oregon State had not won in the Coliseum in 61 years.
It's crazy. Because Oregon State's
60s.
Not a good team.
No. Even when they had Chad Johnson and all of them, those guys, I mean, USC was kind of just starting their great run, but still 61 years.
Yeah, exactly.
And the fan attendance that program is done for now. And I don't know who's going to take that job, but they're done. So I enjoyed that thoroughly. And that's a great way to end our show today. Before you leave, hit the like button, hit the subscribe bell, hit the notification bell. If you're listening via podcast, give us a 5-star review. And of course, sign up for our message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. For Vince, Brian, everybody have a great rest of your day. We will talk to you again tomorrow. We're going to dive into Notre Dame and Cincinnati, Vince. It is a big, big week. This could be the week that determines if Notre Dame is going to be a playoff team, and we're going to explain that to you all, why that is over these next few shows. So, Vince, get back to class.
Yes, sir.
Talk to you soon, buddy.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.